And now I'm also going to push us live on Facebook. And folks are jumping in.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome in. We're just about to turn us live on the Facebook. Jason, if you could, if you're the furious typer, if you could mute yourself till we jump in.
Sure. How do I mute on Zoom?
Cool. All right, so we are about to go live. Facebook's doing some magic.
If there's something I should share on Facebook, I could do that.
All right, welcome in, friends. If folks just want to mute themselves as they're popping in, and we're pushing live. And so if you are live on Facebook, we're about to just update the page into a couple of other places. So just hang tight with us, getting started on the launch. So we're just going to push this into the started on the launch. But I'm going to mute myself in that video because that would be insane to listen to on both sides. So if you're checking us out on Facebook Live, you're just jumping in. We're going to get started in just a minute or two with the official launch event. Some of the great panelists and contributors to the book are already in with us now. And we're just getting this updated in a couple of places so folks can check it out. And for those of you who are in the panel, I'll just drop it in here so you can grab it. It's in the chat, so if you want to share that out. So we are just getting ready to talk about the live launch. We're just gonna warming up the internet engines here, and so if you're on Facebook Live, we'll get started in just a minute or two. All right, so thank you so much. If you are jumping in and joining us, we are talking about the launch of the second edition of the digital plan. Super pumped to have you along with us. You can ask questions in the Facebook comments. You could also throw them on Twitter. We'll be checking that a little bit later. Give you a little bit of run and show. I'm going to give you a little bit of the story of the book and kind of where we're at with the second edition, which just came out today, and I'm super pumped about. And as I said in the live earlier, I'm often super pumped, and so, but I'm exceptionally super pumped today. And so just really excited about getting this out there for folks. And so talk a little about the book, and then Katrina, who is the amazing editor and really helped bring the first edition, second edition to life, is going to be helping lead a little bit of the conversation with the other contributors, because she helped pull in those contributions and help them make sense in context of the bigger book, which is you know, a very amazing skill set and talent, and just super valuable. I think that folks are really going to find even more engagement and more use in this second edition. So we are going to go live. We are live, and so I'm going to go ahead and just share a little bit. You know, here is the book. We are super excited about it. Very much designed in some different ways than the previous edition. And so first, I just want to tell you a little bit about, kind of how this second edition kind of came to be, and a little bit about like how the book, how the theory of the book kind of came together overall. So I'm actually going to do a semi-quick presentation for you with some slides, so you're not just looking at my face. And then we're going to jump into the conversation with everyone else that is here. So we're super pumped about that. So we're just going to fire up the presentation real quick. Oh, jumped forward in time. So I just want to give a little bit of the backstory of like how we ended up here in the book. So my name's Brad. So some of you may not know me. You might be just be seeing this on the live stream. I've been working in the digital campaign space for about 10 years now. A lot of it at an Obama campaign world, and some of that was at the DNC, which is the D logo there, the Democratic Party, and the logo on the right, I think most people know as the Obama logo. And in that time, a lot of this, the idea of this book actually started in 2010, which is kind of crazy to think about. But we did this amazing training with folks from the state parties across the country, and we were still calling it new media back then, and we were just on the verge of a lot of these concepts coming out. And I had the lead role in that training to do the like this is how you put on a plan, right? And we walked through a bunch of different tactics, and we got to the end, and I was like, so here's the plan and a template for a plan, and how you would kind of arrange elements of a plan. And the question was, well, how many tweets should be in my plan? And I realized that there was something amiss, right? We had this whole training for a few hours, and folks, and part of it is realizing that folks didn't quite understand the tactics, right? They didn't quite understand how to link together the tactical pieces into a strategy, which is, a plan is like a living strategy, or should be a living strategy. If it's not a living strategy, I'm not quite sure what it is, right? Because these are, we often call them blueprints, but they should be somewhat editable, right? And so I realized then that folks need a little something different and deeper. And then on the 2012 campaign, I was the digital training director, and it was my job to think of training for current staff, for volunteers, field staff. We also realized even then, when we were hiring digital directors, and this is now 6 years ago, that folks often had experience in one specific niche or field, and they may have been great about that. They might have been great at email or social media or video production, but they often didn't have the other skills, and they're often like pretty disparate skills is kind of one of the important things that I like to talk a lot about with folks. And it kind of makes a lot of sense in this next slide, but we realized that I actually had to do a lot of training with folks who were digital directors, right? Folks who were coming in to help lead a state, and things were still so new. And the reality is, though, 6 years later, we're still kind of there, where a lot of folks have skill in one niche area because these aren't the same thing, right? So we have this modern lens where we call all of these things digital, but email, SMS, data analytics, graphic design, web development, digital organizing, social media, email writing, like often like email writing and web design and development are literally using different parts of your brain that like function very differently. And there are some people who are great at all of these things. A lot of times we're not, and like that's okay. But that's part of the genesis of the book is really, and a lot of this bigger training is to say like, hey, it is okay that you don't know all of these things. We're here to help try to give you some guidance on some of these things. And also the idea that you, like any individual could become quickly an expert in all of these things is also kind of insane. And so it's a little bit to help you figure out some of the questions and help understand like, oh, I don't know some of these things. That turns out that's normal. And so like I keep finding folks in the digital space who kind of feel bad. They're like, I feel like I'm failing because I don't know all of the latest social media tools, but I've been a web developer all my life. And yes, I like social media, but and it's like, it's cool. I've been doing this for a decade, and there's still lots of things that I don't know, right? And that's why we have to build on this knowledge together. And another big piece of it is tactics aren't goals, right? And so a big thing we talk a lot about in the book is really about finding your way to goals and really thinking about strategy in that way. And one of our big problems that I think we have a lot in the digital space is that folks really confuse tactics and goals, and that when you confuse tactics and goals, right, like making a video or making a website isn't the goal. The goal should be, what are you trying to shift in the world? What are the things you're trying to make better or change or advocate for? how is this tactic deployable to help meet that in the world? And so the book itself really focuses in a lot on that specifically. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the screen share and then just talk a little bit more about the book itself. And then let's just pull this down. Folks should feel free to, you can start queuing up questions if you have them in the comments there on Facebook Live, or feel free to tweet at the digital plan. We'll be checking both. And so a couple of little things I just want to share with you about the new book that I'm geeked out about. And then the thing I'm even more geeked about is the panelists, right? Amazingly, 30 different strategists, CEOs, activists came together to help really build out a much deeper version of the book. I'll show you I love to show them side by side, right? Here was the original version. This is the much upgraded 2.0, literally just like much bigger all the way around. And no, we didn't just pad it with bigger margins. It's actually full of more content, literally more chapters and stories and anecdotes and best practices from these other strategists. And what was amazing is roughly 50 or 60 fairly senior level strategists said that they're interested, and it turns out they're all super, super busy. And so some of them couldn't contribute to that, but they're gonna come back and do some trainings and different things with us over the course of the year. And some other stuff we're really just pumped about is it's just the design. So one of the things Katrina and I went back and forth on when we were launching last year was like, do we just get a product in the world that folks can use because we know they need it? And that's where we kind of ended. We ended with this, this version. And those of you that know it well know that it reads a lot more like a textbook on the inside. And so folks who were like real deep in the wonkiness or like really needed a thing, they were like, oh, this is great. This is like a perfect thing. But we really wanted to think about accessibility. How do you make it more skimmable? And so we worked with an amazing designer named Tabitha. So if you need an interior book designer, happy to recommend Tabitha. She was amazing. And we really, throughout the book, we added in a lot of features. They're just little things to just break up the design and really kind of help you orientate to where you are in the book, like these little breakout, pop-out nuggets there. Really love those. And the other piece that we incorporated that I think is really important, because we intended this book to really be for three main audiences. One, for folks who are in a leadership role in an organization, in a campaign, that you're kind of new to digital and you're like, I don't quite know what I need to ask, right? And so some of those folks are, they don't quite know how to coach folks on their team, or they're also getting hustled by snake oil salespeople, who I think make up about 30% of all digital folks in the world. Thankfully, no one who's on the panel tonight. And so we really made this how to use this chapter for every section, right? And so we instead of saying like, we'd like to infer that there are ways to use this, we took it on the nose. And so we built out these sections for digital leadership. So if you're in digital leadership or you're in management of an organization, we've got some thoughts for you on like, hey, this is maybe a skimmable chapter, or this is the thing you really need to dig into. If you're already a staffer, some ways you could think about this chapter. And then if if you're an activist or kind of new staffers in digital place, some other ways for you to think about it. So we're just pumped about how this came together. I'm excited about all the folks who are on tonight, and so then I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the Q&A, interjecting with some questions myself for the panelists. But from here, turn it over to Katrina, let her share a little bit about the book. I'm going to mute myself, and then she'll introduce the other folks that are on the panel with us tonight.
Thanks, Brad. Can y'all hear me okay? Cool. So I'm Katrina Mendoza. I'm just thrilled to be a part of this project. Brad and I met long ago when we were working at Rainforest Action Network. And I was really just impressed by the wealth and depth of his knowledge when it comes to digital strategy. And I think I learned more about digital strategy under him with him as director than I had in my entire life. So when he invited me to help with the digital plan, initially I jumped in full force, and we started by just putting out the information, like, let's take all of these different areas of digital, from social to email, website development, like basically anything that might represent your group or yourself online, and let's put it into a handbook so that you can just understand what it takes to navigate the space, and then also what are the best practices to do well. And Brad, with his experience, had all of the strategy and tactics. So a lot of my work was to help make the book as easily readable and accessible. And with the second edition, we wanted to also make it aesthetically pleasing. So it's the kind of book that's really easy to skim. And it's also a book that I'm just constantly going back to remind myself of the more complex details. So we really wanted it to be the kind of thing that anyone could pick up and just gain a quick understanding, or really like advance your digital knowledge and using strategy and tactics and a goal-oriented process. So I guess the one thing I wanted to say about this book that I think is really so valuable is that it breaks down the process of how to think about digital and how to create a plan that is just an ongoing thing. So you could jump into the book and know right away if it's going to be helpful or not using the beginnings of the chapter. It says how to use this book. But I think the part I was actually most excited about were all of the contributions, the amount of people who really jumped in and brought passionate stories that are so engaging. That's absolutely my favorite part. And being able to be the person who was able to read through all of these stories and take them in. And I mean, I probably read them each like 7 to 10 times. I feel like an expert, and I'm also just so grateful for the diversity of contributions and all of the stories that came with it. Like I never felt so close to a presidential campaign as I did in this book. So really appreciate everyone contributing. As an editor, I also contributed some written pieces on storytelling and video. That's what I do every day, and I'm very passionate about community building. So feel free to reach out to me about any of that. But I also just wanted to turn it over to our awesome panelists. I see Jason's here, so is Liz, and I saw Hillary, but I don't see her anymore. And Jay, is that you, Jay? Cool. So Jason wrote a beautiful piece about email engagement, and if you'd like to tell us more about the context of it and a bit about your background, I'd love to hear more.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Jason Rosenbaum. I'm Director of Technology at Action Network. Very excited to be part of this. It's a great effort, and I think it's really important to spread the knowledge in this way, the way that you're doing it in an accessible way. So very, very excited to be part of it. I contributed just a little bit about kind of email engagement and deliverability, that kind of thing. I think it's a big mystery to a lot of folks, but it doesn't need to be. It's actually not that complicated. Gmail and Yahoo and big email providers like that, really, they just decide whether something is spam based on whether they think you're going to engage with it, if you're going to open it and read it and click on it and, get something out of the email. So really the answer is, if you want your emails to end up in inboxes and not spam boxes, then you just need to send email to people who are going to engage with it. And that can mean a lot of things in practice, but it's actually a simple type of thing. What's good for you and what's good for your program and what's good for, your organization and the movement. Sending highly engaging emails to the people who want to receive them is also magically good for your deliverability. So, I contributed a little bit of the story about my time with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee when I was helping run their email list, working with candidates that we had endorsed, helping those programs get off the ground, and just some techniques that I use to manage that. And so, buy the book, check out that anecdote. Hopefully it'll bring something to you, but, just wanted to demystify that process a little bit.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jason. And thanks for that note, Brad. I totally see all of the panelists now. So, Liz, I believe you were next on the call. So why don't you tell us a bit about your background and the piece you contributed to the book? And unmute yourself first, maybe.
That would help. Hi, everyone. I'm Liz. Congratulations, Brad, Katrina. It's really nice to meet you all. And hi, everyone on the call. I'm very excited to be here and just be a part of this. I concur with everything you just said, Jason, and it's a process. The digital knowledge is an endless process. I am grateful to be included in this, and we're glad to contribute some of the strategy that, a case study of working in the field, trying to capture an enormous event and all the video storytelling involved. I'm the founder of Ecodio, which is a small, nimble digital media firm that's focused on video packages and storytelling around sustainability. I'm extremely passionate about sustainability and sustainable development. The contribution to the book was about one of our clients, a conservation congress, and it was a great event. And I learned a lot, and we covered a lot of ground. So, you go in with certain goals and plans, and you come out with some of those met and some new ones. And it's about, being nimble on the ground and how great your team is. So, I'd love to contribute to any questions, or I'm just grateful to be here, and congrats, you guys.
Thank you, Liz. I hope to one day do video work at the scale that you have done. So thank you for your contribution.
Well, I look forward to meeting, talking more, collaborating. Yeah.
Great. Let's go to Hillary next. Hillary, are you there?
I'm here, Katrina. Hi.
Hi, thank you. Tell us more about your background. And I believe you had a couple contributions on peer-to-peer text.
Yeah, and I'm so happy to be on with two fellow Ranimals. I also got my start back in the day at Rainforest Action Network. Just such an incredible organization that really punches above its weight, and I think they're, as Liz mentioned, a real embodiment of being nimble and trying new things and getting really scrappy in order to get things done. And I feel like I've tried to really carry the spirit of that as I go more and more into the digital space. And it's been a really cool road for me personally, starting out at RAND, doing organizing. I sure could have used a tool like Hustle. I was going out to Minneapolis and organizing the dead of winter. It was really cold. Wheat paste actually freezes at a certain temperature, and you can't put posters up on the pole. So to go from that experience, really being on the ground and forming relationships, in the classic Marshall Gann style, leveraging those relationships around shared values for an ask and getting people to turn out, take action to move a campaign forward. It's a lot of those guiding principles that have sort of moved me forward at the different places where I've worked and on the different projects that I've been a part of. And essentially, it's a lot of the same mechanisms of organizing, but different embodiments of it and different tools that you use for it. So I went from RAND to Global Exchange, and then dipped over a little bit more onto the technology side. So I was at Causes, which was an offshoot of Facebook Causes, and then Brigade, doing a little bit more on kind of the viral petition side. And that side really hit scale really quickly, but the relationship was a little bit weaker, right? A petition signature could open the door to a lot of powerful relationships that could be leveraged for collective action, but they also could not, right? And they could be lost, and the value of those could easily be lost as well. And the strength of the relationship could dwindle over time. So I feel like I really hit the sweet spot at Hustle with peer-to-peer. Text is where we have a lot of our most important conversations. I'm sure if anybody took a peek at your phone, probably one of the most important messages you've received over any medium is probably text. It's where we have some of those most important conversations. And so being able to really wrangle our amazing client feedback into shaping our product so that it best served our clients has been a real privilege and honor, kind of bringing in the context that I have coming from the organizing and nonprofit world and making sure that our tools align to best serve those needs, I think is an important responsibility that those of us who walk the line between organizing and technology have, is to really drive that alignment and let our clients and organizers lead the way, right? Because a lot of these new tools aren't really changing any of the formulas of organizing. We're still building those relationships and leveraging them, but we're constantly lily padding onto the newest mechanisms by which to accomplish that old school organizing. And so that's been a really fun thing to see what's different and also what really stays the same. So I was happy to kind of reflect on that and some of the mechanisms for on the technology side, how building a diverse team, making sure that we lead with empathy really keeps us on track. And that's been a really fun thing to be a part of.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hillary. If there's one thing I learned, it's that peer-to-peer texting works.
It does work,
so
yeah. Thanks, Katrina.
In really cool ways. So thank you for your contributions. I'm going to hop down the list. So Lloyd, are you there? And would you like to do an intro and some context about your piece?
Sure. Thanks. I'm Lloyd. I wrote a piece on broadcast SMS, which is a little different than peer-to-peer, which is what Hill wrote about. So broadcast SMS is, short code SMS, kind of opt-in messaging, and definitely has some different uses than peer-to-peer. So I was just from HFA for Hillary for America. So I ran our short code program there, and similar to kind of relationship building that we do through peer-to-peer, it's really about like connecting your supporters to the campaign, right? Or giving them kind of like fun treats and Easter eggs and kind of really rewarding like serious participation, right? Folks who are willing to like get a text message from Hillary Clinton or get several text messages from Hillary Clinton a week, right? Those are folks that like you really want to reward and you want to give them cool stuff and really thank them for being a part of your program. Because they're also really active, right? So they're great folks to ask for donations or to show up at rallies or to invite their friends. These are people that are like super committed. So it was really exciting for me to go from kind of a consulting role. I was at Mobile Commons for many years, just like helping other folks do this, to being able to kind of take the reins of my own big program and really help build that relationship and kind of really like open up a new stream for folks to connect with the campaign and kind of see not just what Hillary was doing and what Hillary was about, but like what Jess was actually about and what our digital organizing program was about and how folks could get involved and really, make a difference, which I like to think they did.
Awesome. Thanks, Lloyd. And for context, for those of you listening, Lloyd wrote the chapter on SMS in the book. And it is a special chapter with pictures. And so you can see actual pictures of the texts. We really appreciate your contribution. Thank you, Lloyd.
Thank you. I love a good visual aid, so.
Yeah, that's for sure. Cool. So next we have Alex. Alex, are you there?
I hope that's me, at least. There are usually many Alexes, so if it's not, great. So hi everybody, I am so excited to be here tonight to see all your faces, to be a part of this project. I'm the digital organizing director at OFA, and moving from like version of OFA to version of OFA has been really interesting. And at this point, I think one of the things that I have spent the year doing is really wrestling with a different way to look at how to evaluate what we're doing in terms of like relationship building at scale. So I went the social science route, and I did lots of reading and lots of research and kind of really diving deeply into what was going on to provide a context of not just what's happening in politics, but what's happening to our communities nationwide. And there are a lot of trends that surfaced that are a little bit alarming in terms of our engagement with any kind of volunteer activities. So that's civic engagement for sure, but it's also participation in things like the PTA or labor unions or even religious activities, sports clubs, all over the board. So the piece that I wrote is a little bit more on providing that kind of social context. And if our communities at large are disintegrating, maybe it's not just a matter of looking at the message or the candidate or the tactics, but it's also, how are we investing in deep relationships, and how does our organizing and digital models, how do they contribute toward developing those deep relationships and then leveraging them for mobilizing moments? So there's one study in particular that I found super helpful that was actually written way back in 1976, and it was like, unlike many academic papers, actually pretty easy to read, and there were pieces to it that broke out kind of nicely that I then put together as a form of like a checklist, so that it's easier for people, like on campaigns, as we all know, we're all crazy busy. So it's easier for people to kind of go through and check and see how well am I building community, and how cohesive is my community, and where can I improve. So that's included as an attachment or annex, I believe. So it was a really interesting piece of it was a great opportunity to be able to dive into this stuff, because it's been a really interesting inquiry, and I hope that it can serve for all of the work that we're doing. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Alex, and extra points for bringing trees into the picture. That talk about context.
Chicago spring, finally.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right, Jay, you're next. Take us away.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks to Brad for writing this and then coming back at it, writing it again. Well done. It's great to meet you, Katrina, and great to be here with everybody. So my background is, I won't go too far into it, but I've been a community organizer and a campaigner at a bunch of different causes, actually mostly on the advocacy side. So I come a little bit more from the advocacy than the electoral side here, work with a bunch of different organizations and campaigns. And so able to pull out some patterns to bring to bear on some of this writing stuff. I recently founded my own firm to really just build scalable organizing using digital. So looking at actually how do we build really scalable organizing programs and utilize the true capacity of our kind of digital tools. And so my piece in the book is about a pretty specific example with an advocacy organization of interpreting some problems and some things that could have been better at the organization, then using a tool that I'm calling an organizational wide engagement cycle to look at how we could get all of the departments at the organization actually aligned in consensus on where we were trying to take supporters together. And what that looked like, what that gave us, and how it made our digital department more effective. And I think also made the work more rewarding for our digital staff. So thinking about digital staff, retention, and all of those pieces is something that Brad also brings into the work and into the book. So I think that's pretty critical.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jay. We appreciate your contribution and just for being here today, bringing us your good vibes, your good energy. And next we have Jim.
Hey, happy to participate in this discussion.
Welcome.
So I know Brad from way back in 2010 when we both worked together for Organizing for America out in DC. I ran our digital analytics and web development team there. So we were handling all of the president's web presence, doing analysis on the data. And I, several years later, founded a company, Share Progress, where we also did a lot of work in that space. And so my contribution to the book actually really focused on web development. Typically, you might assume that the most important things to talk about in that space would be technical in nature. But the point that I actually wanted to make was around communication. What I've seen again and again is when organizations are trying to do web development, whether it's a website refresh, whether it's building a new app, oftentimes the biggest hurdles aren't the technical ones. It's actually the internal communication where you're trying to get the developers and the technical people aligned with other folks in the organization on what you're actually doing here. So very related to what Jay was just talking about, making sure you actually have that alignment. And very often, that is not prioritized nearly as much as it ought to be. You want to be spending a pretty significant amount of time up front, making sure that everyone is on the same page, that the idea that a campaign manager or an executive director may have in their head for what their website is going to do and look like is first possible, because that's not always true. And then second, that it's something that the technical people who will be working to make it happen actually understand what is the motivation there, and that it may not be what the non-technical person describes it as may not fully communicate what their underlying desires are. And so making sure you dig a bit deeper and actually have those conversations and really design a process to ensure that throughout the creation of the website or web app, that you have those touch points to make sure you're staying aligned, and so you don't end up in a spot where what is created doesn't ultimately match the vision. And so I think I think that translates into far more areas than just web development and digital. We still have a lot of people who are running campaigns and organizations who don't quite get a lot of this stuff. And so making sure that you do prioritize and you do make the time to actually have those conversations and get everyone on the same page.
Thanks, Jim. I could hear all the muted snaps for so many things you were saying. Everyone's like, yep. I guess I'll put my writer's hat on now and tell you a little bit about my video piece that I contributed. I have background working in local politics, the tech industry, and nonprofit industries. And just, I don't know, out of mere coincidence in each of those spaces, I've had to build up a production kit for those companies from scratch. So how do you build up a video and media kit so that you're ready to just go and capture what can then be used for marketing? And then not only how do you build up that kit, but then how do you use it well to tell a story as quickly and easily as possible. So in my piece, I just tried to break down as quickly and simply as possible how to shoot and edit to get the most out of the work that you're doing. And it's pretty short and easily digestible. So I hope that you can all make use of that in some way. I also just want to thank all of our panelists for being here. It really is the best part of this book, having everyone involved. It really gave the book another life that it didn't quite have as many colors before. So it feels really amazing to be a part of a project with so many people involved. And we also really appreciate that everyone contributed a way of connection and contact. So if you read a story and you're really stoked about someone, you have a way of reaching out and contacting them. So thank you all. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Brad for whatever digital magic he wants to share with us next.
Yeah. So, you know, folks, if you're watching live, we're totally open for questions, and just kind of brought us up with the Brady Bunch. It's amazing we have the right number of people to be Brady Bunch tiled. And it's funny, everyone's view is different, because like what's actually on Facebook Live, I'm in the corner and I'm not up above, and I don't know what I look like on your screen. So, anyways. Yeah, I'm just super pumped everyone that's here. I think an interesting thing we could also open up is if any of the panelists want to ask each other a question, that's a super interesting space to kind of get into. You know, it's amazing for me. I know all of you, some in deep ways, some in brief ways. You know, also there's like some really interesting interlapping pieces here. We have folks who are at RAN at very different times, and folks who are from Obama world at very different times who I don't think even know each other. And so, yeah, I think, I'll just step back real quick. If anyone wants to unmute themselves and throw a question to someone else or to me, we'll do that real quick, and then I'll queue up some other questions.
I've got a question for the authors. Tell us more about how long it took to write, and you know, the process and all that. I mean, I think it looks like an amazing amount of work, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a question I love to share too, because I also share about the publishing industry as well, which is a fascinating thing that I didn't know anything about. I started the very first pieces of the book just after the 2012 campaign. And so I wrote a chapter or two in November 2012. Then the inauguration happened, and OFA happened, and I shelved the project. And it's really interesting. There were a couple of times I tried to, I wanted to work on the book and couldn't quite figure it out. And then I would find myself, so on one level, it is like a many years long process. And I found myself interestingly stuck in a, trying to figure out the publishing world several times trap. And if anyone's ever tried to figure out the publishing world, it's almost you can't figure it out, right? Which is kind of why it's a trap. And basically what I was finding, and I was like, maybe I'm crazy. Like, I can't imagine you have to have the product done before you talk to publishers. That sounds like a really weird way to go about it. And it turns out, unless you are currently making news or have a massive following, that is 100% reality. That you like have to have a done product before the thing kind of happens, and or unless they proactively seek you out, right? Like if you somehow are involved in something crazy and they're like, oh, we could totally make some money off of that. Let's make a book really quick. Those are the only ways you can not have a done product before they, before you start to talk to them. And so I started working on it more seriously, actually not until about 2016. I started working on it. The hope was to get it out before the 2016 electoral cycle. And one of the things I found really helpful in the whole process was actually starting a Kickstarter. So then I I had just found out for me personally, I'm really good at being accountable to others. I'm less good at being accountable to me. And so like, even if I just say I will volunteer for a thing, I will do that thing. If I like tell myself like I need to exercise more, like that doesn't always happen. And so like the book, like as much as I wanted the book to be a reality, it was really hard to bring into the world without the accountability. So put up a Kickstarter, and part of the vision of the Kickstarter was like, oh, we'll use this like directly to help pay for the copy editor, Katrina. I wish the thing pointed in the same direction. I think I'm pointing at you now on the live screen. And so having a copy editor was huge. So the raw production of the beginning of the book, or the second piece of the book, interestingly, I found so we put it on hold for 2016 also. I had started writing some chunks of it. I didn't feel like I could get a great thing done. And actually I put an ask out to people who had contributed on Facebook, like, would you guys rather I wait to put out a more solid thing or like get this thing out the door? And folks were like, if someone doesn't have a digital plan by August, and I think the reality is it probably like September. I think we're looking at September at that point for they're like, like it's September, like sure they could figure something out, but maybe you should just let it go. So we did, and the core of the book actually really happened from November to December of 2016, and then we kind of finessed it and cleaned it up in January 2017 and launched it. And I found interestingly for me that creating a container of word count was the most effective thing I could do. And one of the big struggles I had in actually producing the book, though, and this started early on when I first was thinking about the book, and like tugged at me or boggled my mind for a while, was that I couldn't figure out a consistent chapter structure that made sense for these really disparate disciplines and like how we often use them in digital. And I said to myself, like, it's actually okay. Like these could actually be very different chapters. And so any of you that know the first edition know that like the chapters are actually really different and they make sense in the book together, but also like, and I think that makes sense, right? Because like web development and email writing are really different. Like there are some systematic things that can be similar. And so it's like, and Katrina was really amazing at like making the opening and closing of the chapters make sense and shifting. Interesting thing, my take on everything was much more negative in the first draft. I was like, here's a bunch of questions you should ask, and you'll have stupid answers, and you'll get stupid results. And she was like, yeah, that's not what anyone wants to read. And I was like, that's fair. That makes a lot of sense. And I think like anyone's worked in digital a long time, though, it's like how we can start to feel, especially because in digital, I think you often like you find yourself in these like weird bubbles where there aren't a lot of digital peers around you often, unless you're networking or whatever. So that was kind of process one, and process two started almost as soon as we finished the first one to some degree. We were kicking around ideas, and it really ended up being, I don't know, Katrina, you might know, like I think it almost took us 6 months to do the second edition. It turns out following up with really busy strategists is really hard to get them to finish pieces of copy. And as we were finishing it, we worked with a formal designer this time. And I looked into publishing again. So like coming back to that story, all the way back around the engagement cycle, talked to a publisher, amazing thing. Because I was like, should I work with a publisher or should we stay self-published? They were like, this is a really interesting book. And yeah, we think by like June of 2019, we could probably have it in production. I was like, luckily they put the date twice in the same email, or I would have thought I misread it. It turns out just like if you're not part of the breaking news cycle, the way the traditional like publishing thing works is like they make they spend several months recreating or copy editing. I'm not quite sure what that several month process is. But then they have their physical version they print. I don't know if they can't print one really quickly on Amazon or not, but it takes them a while to make their first version. And then they go shop that around at book fairs, like with distributors, and then they build their bulk order, and then like 6 months later, it shows up in stores. And I'm like, that's a wild process. And folks need this info now, right? And so, yeah, so we self-published because of that. But Katrina, if you want to share other pieces on the timeline and kind of those pieces.
Yeah, more just what I really appreciated about working with Brad is that he just does something and like it just has to move and we can perfect it in the process. And to be able to be on the other side of someone just churning out chapter after chapter on a rolling basis and to see how quickly something can move when you really just jump in. I think that was my favorite part about working on this book, just knowing that if you really do have a will to teach these awesome things, then there is a way to get it done. And it absolutely was not perfect the first draft. Like there were so many things we had to work out, but we worked them out. And by the second edition, it just felt like, okay, this actually feels like what we were aiming for. And it took 2 editions, but it was fun along the entire way. And I remember you said that you were inspired to write this because it's just one of those bases of knowledge you find yourself sharing again and again and again. And you're eventually just like, you know, I wish I just had a book that I could just hand to people. And I did that with actually the first edition. I just had a big box, and every time I came across, you know, a young budding entrepreneur or a client that really needed help, I'm like, here, just take this and put it to good use. And I know I felt really inspired to contribute because just teaching people the quick and easy ways to do things well. Like, I know I can't get enough of those tips, and to have such expertise being conveyed in this book. I mean, like, I feel very inspired by all of the contributions, and I believe it was everyone's passion to contribute that really inspired me to jump in. But I would love to hear from any of the panelists, like what inspired you to share the piece that you did?
And I'll jump in real quick. You guys think of your inspiration. Fun thing for me on 2 parts. One, I was, and I think it's like a little bit of like, it's never done. Like digital is still evolving and so complicated. I was reading through the print version, which I got printed so many times. I did recycle it all, but environmentalist me was also like, man, should I really be printing this? And I also don't know how to proof 200 pages without printing it when you're trying to figure it out for production. I read Jason's chapter just as I was trying to help Vote.org handle some stuff on their deliverability, and I was like, this is so good. And I'm like, and I couldn't tell anyone really about it because I was like, oh yeah, I have to print this book, so like I should just get that done. And then and we implemented some of that strategy, but it's been really beautiful reading people's anecdotes. And one of the craziest things was even last year in the first edition, we were talking about something strategic, and an activist at a group repeated back to me what was in the book. And I was like, oh, that's a great idea. She's like, I know. It's like on page 45, you should, you know, really just make sure you remember that yourself. And I was like, oh, burn. Yeah, thank you. So would love to hear folks' inspiration too. It'd be great.
Can I just jump in on one thing really quickly that I think for a lot of us who are on kind of the tool provider side, there's this really interesting perspective that you get that is kind of a unique one in some ways. I think if you do consulting or other types of roles where you're providing a service for lots of clients, you start to see how many commonalities there are and how many organizations or campaigns find themselves in nearly exactly the same boat. They're struggling with the same challenges. They're, you know, working against the same obstacles or blocks, and they're also finding a common language to talk about wins and best practices and strategies. So a lot of times I find that I build on my facilitation skills almost, right, where I'm just sort of really focused on building the collective knowledge in the room. And these are also the collective career skills, right, and collective professionals who are people that staff these really important roles at organizations. So in some ways, you're building people's career skills helping people find and get placed in great jobs where they can put those skills to use, and they move and propel entire organizations forward. And I think it's really fun perspective to see somebody who, might be, for example, in my case, one of the first admins in a hustle group. And they're like, oh, wow, man, I had standing room only in my event. I've had trouble getting to 30% capacity. And then all of a sudden, I'm standing room only. And they're so effusive with the results that they got using the tool. The way that they use the tool, the language that they provided, the script that they use, those are all best practices that find their way to other people who are in other affiliates or other chapters or their states. And then they have standing room only, right? So it's kind of a fun way where you can share best practices and build collective knowledge in a way that really empowers other individuals to excel in their careers, in their organizations. But you also start to see how we have so much in common, even when we're working on vastly different issues. I think that always stands out to me as something that's really interesting.
I think the motivation for me, it actually goes back to what you were saying earlier, Brad, which is to start with your goals and think about where you want to end up as an organization. And for me, based on working with, at this point, dozens of different progressive groups, thinking about, all right, consistently, what are the issues that tend to prevent people from successfully achieving those goals? And that was what led me to focus on the communication aspect of being the barrier, just because that is, more so than anything else, I would say, the part of the process that has stymied organizations from actually getting what they want and best serving the purpose they're trying to achieve.
I guess I'll jump in. I was thrilled when I got the email to be involved because I find the dialogue so exciting. If you're anything like me, you find the digital, or I think we all have this in common, the digital landscape is an ever-changing place. And, I find that this ongoing dialogue is something I want to be part of always. I met Brad back in 2011 on the Obama campaign, somewhere like in Nevada, or I don't know where we were, but at some event. And, I learned a lot on that campaign by osmosis, just by the digital strategy at the time. And every project that I've done since, the digital strategy and the digital plan it adjusts. It's different. You start out with goals, the client starts out with goals, and the needs can change over time. So being nimble and adapting to that, I find really exciting, and creating new, solutions and different strategies. I love talking about it and finding, a cool approach. So I was inspired to be a part of this dialogue, and I hope that this dialogue continues for a long time.
I can jump in next if nobody else wants to go. For me, it was a lot about demystifying SMS and making it accessible for folks on the broadcast side, because a lot of folks just kind of feel like it's very expensive, or how do I start? What do I do? And don't really know where to begin or know what they don't know about it. And it's so important, right? It was such a huge tool for Hillary. It's a great tool for folks like Everytown for Gun Safety or Planned Parenthood, right? Folks who are really using it effectively to drive phone calls to Congress, to raise money and really connect with those supporters. And I just felt like there wasn't a ton of knowledge out there about it, or a ton of easily accessible answers to some questions that I feel like folks always have. So it was so exciting for me to hang out with Brad and kind of talk about what I could contribute and how I can help make that more accessible for people, because I really do think that there is never going to be another presidential campaign where the candidate doesn't stand on the stage and tell people to opt into their short code, right? And that's just a thing that more folks need to know about, and I was really excited to be the one to share with them.
So quickly, I'm also really interested in a question of how we build more scalable organizing infrastructure. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I still see a lot of digital programs out there that could go a lot further in terms of actually leveraging the power that they've banked in their databases and their email lists, and actually taking that further. And so I'm really interested in sort of any of the materials and training that help folks kind of actually leverage this power and engagement that they have. I think it's really sort of on the cutting edge of where digital needs to be right now. And of course, in order to do that, you have to have some alignment on goals and what that big goal looks like, organization wide. And so I'm really interested in mobilization and leveraging power. And I think this is a tool directly to do that and to sort of like take digital beyond the realm of just digital marketing, right? These are the things that make us different from folks who do just digital marketing. This is the cutting edge of the power edge of what digital, for the causes that we work for really can be. And so that's, I just jumped at the chance to contribute.
I think for me, one of the biggest things is that there's an opportunity to use our tools for a purpose that achieves something society-wide. Because if we don't build good communities, then we're probably not going to have the power that we need to leverage for key moments. So as far as my inspiration goes, I see a nationwide need to really invest in this as a priority to make sure that we are really stepping up the game to participate in civic engagement, not just because it is the right thing to do for a candidate or a cause, but because it's part of our very social fabric. And if we begin to lose that, then we begin to lose our ability to really coalesce around any kind of social movement. So I have always been stunned by the intelligence and the creativity of the people that I've worked with, that I've come into contact with as a part of the progressive movement, especially in digital. And I just want to be able to leverage that to be able to push our entire society forward. So for me, it was an opportunity to really rally around a collective cause that I think is super, super important for us all.
I guess I can go as well. A lot like Hillary said, and like Lloyd was saying, demystifying, I think, is a big thing. I get these questions all the time from people I know or people who are using our platform, and I think I understand why they think email deliverability is mysterious and like email engagement is mysterious, but it's not. It doesn't have to be. There are broader ways to think about it, kind of what Jay was saying, really thinking about your program in a deeper and more engaging and more diverse type of way. So, was happy to try to do my part in demystifying that and getting people to think about it a little bit differently.
Cool. I think everyone shared some inspiration. That's awesome. I did want to say to Jay's point about goals, I feel like simply clarifying a goal can get you out of so many meetings and get you past and get to progress. Like if someone can't tell me what's your desired outcome of this meeting, I'm like, get back to me when it is, because then we can jump in. And also in working towards goals, having those sub goals, and that's something we definitely reiterate through every chapter in the book. Like it's definitely a lot about goals. And also to Liz's point about community and ongoing community, really stoked to have an online digital plan community, and we hope that you're all going to be involved in a part of it, because we couldn't release editions fast enough to keep up with the work that you all are doing. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great segue, and also there's we'll loop back around and see if we have some closing thoughts then from folks too. Is the book is one of many pieces of what we're trying to do. We launched online trainings about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago. I'm not quite sure. Somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks ago, we launched online trainings, and we are now offering. So we're pretty excited about that. There are webinars folks can drop in on twice a week. At the very, like, we have a bare minimum twice a week, and we have additional folks coming on, and we're really excited. Beth Becker, who does a lot of social media trainings, is doing one with us tomorrow, and we have some booked in the future with her. And we're going to be, hopefully having a lot more hosts come in and do those. And one thing we're trying to really solve for there, in having a place with frequent trainings, is there are a number of folks doing good trainings, but they're not very consistent, right? And so there are a number of organizations that I love, but their trainings are either like a weekend training in one city way away, or like a full week training, or and the folks who do, when they do them online, it's like, oh, we're offering a 4-week course, but they do it like 3 times a year, and you don't really know when it's going to happen. And so the hope is to try to create a space that makes it a lot more accessible to folks, right? And make the entry point to just get the information when they need it a lot easier. And so we're still continuing to build that and see what's right for the community and what they need, and then how do we actually keep building on top of that with the book and just different resources that we can get out to folks. And that actually goes back to the piece, and I would love maybe if folks want to share kind of in their closing thoughts. I was doing a conversation up in Toronto. I'm so bad with time. Somewhere between a month and 2 months ago, and we were talking about peer-to-peer messaging with Hustle and the work we had done at Vote.org, and was with the good friends from C Street, who Amy from C Street also does a piece in the book as well, and I really love them doing a lot of great progressive work up there. And one of the, I don't remember the question that prompted it, but one of the key things I think almost everyone who contributed to the book shares is that we think about humans. And so the thing I said was like, I just think that we really need to remember on the other end of all of this digital work is a human. And like what we are trying to do is actually engage other humans and get them to engage in stuff. And so we're not trying to engage, we're not Russians, we're not trying to engage other robots, right? Like we're not the Republican Party trying to get the bots to retweet us. We're actually trying to engage real humans. And that's what we care about. And so, I would love if, it can be very short, but if folks want to share their own thoughts on like what it means to be a little human-centered in digital, in the spectrum of digital tech that you may be engaging with, because it's such a wide spectrum. Love to hear your thoughts.
I thought of this story when Jay was talking just about getting a deeper connection with folks. When I used to work at the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, I thought Adam Green and Stephanie Taylor, the two founders of that organization, really understood that there was a person on the other side of that email that you were sending out, even if you were sending it to 1 million people or whatever it was. They would send emails asking people to lend them their car because they were coming into town and they needed a car. And people would respond and they would get cars. So, you can really, there really are people on the other end of these technologies, and I think it's always really important to remember that.
I think one thing that's really stood out to me, with peer, because you have to hit send on each message that goes out. But I think of it almost kind of lights up this cognitive piece. Like, yes, each time you hit send is going to a real person, and I think having that banter back and forth, and wherever possible, whatever medium you're using, making that as conversational as possible, really letting up that it's a two-way street. It's also very empowering to the person that you're contacting, because they get to do something, right? They get to put in their time or their energy, or they get to loan someone a car, It's an incredibly fulfilling experience for supporters to be asked for things that are not on the standard list of asks. And I think it helps them feel very powerful, like they have something unique to contribute. And as much as we can provide and facilitate those experiences of people feeling powerful and uniquely powerful, I think the better suited we are to build long-term relationships with those supporters. And I feel like it also can be a great way, wherever possible, to incorporate volunteers as some of the messengers and participators in those conversations. Because a lot of times once you try to scale those conversations on digital, very quickly outstrip your capacity to respond in a timely manner. There's nothing more the volunteer wants than to feel like, wow, I talked to 50 people today, right? Or even a new person in the organization, new employee, how better to get acquainted with the supporters and the things that they care about and the issues that they want to be involved with, and to have those conversations. And as much as we can, use digital to scale, but the humanness to keep it very authentic and speak with an authentic voice, the more powerful we'll be. But I think it's both of those axes that we want to hit. It's a great question, Brad.
Yeah, I like this question too. So one of my favorite questions to ask groups when we're working on digital engagement and building their organizing infrastructure is what are the things that your supporters are doing the day before you win, right? So what are they actually doing? And usually that answer is not all of them are working for us as paid staff, right? Right. So it's for me, it's really also about, usually those answers have to do with people have agency within that system. Right. And if your organizing plan is just to use online petitioning and keeping people at that low level, how are they going to get there? Right. And so starting with that question, what are the people what are the humans, to use Brad's wonderful word, what are the humans doing the day before you win, as part of that conversation, right, of starting with that goal and working backwards, but starting with that question too, what are the humans actually doing? Not what does the tech look like? How many, video views are you getting? It's what are the humans actually doing? And that usually the answer has a lot of agency in it. And so how are we looking at handing over that agency to people in a systemic way to tens or hundreds of thousands of folks as we move forward, while maintaining those loops at the other side that are still bringing in brand new folks?
For me, something that I feel like is consistently important is to set aside time to take a step back and always think about, as we're designing a program, as you're putting together an experience, what is that going to be for the people going through it? Because, our natural headspace is so much, what would engage me? And as someone working for the organization, most of the time, the ideal experience that I would want to go through is not particularly indicative of what supporters actually want to be engaging in. And so ideally, if you can, go out and talk to people, better understand where your supporters and your volunteers are at, and actually share what you're thinking about as far as the experience and see what they think about it. If you can't do that for whatever reason, at the very least, setting aside time to really do a step back and say, okay, what is this going to seem like to someone who probably isn't spending day in and day out doing this work and thinking about this, but curious about the issues? How can this be as both empowering, but also as accessible a process for them as possible? Because that's ultimately what's going to make them want to stick with you and actually provide a valuable contribution to the effort.
I love that idea. And I second that idea of taking a step back, Jim. And Brad, I love this dialogue about humans. I think it's really, really important. Sometimes we get so embedded in the work and the process and the strategy, or the plan, the digital plan, that it's really important. What do they do? For some folks who are working on campaigns, what are they doing the day before? But also, what are they doing the day after? And how does it affect them a month later? And as a filmmaker or a content creator, I think a lot about that. And it's something I'm always learning more about. And it's making that space in the digital plan to sort of like, whoa, how is this content going to hit? And thinking beyond hits and all that. Thinking beyond the weeds of the strategy.
I love hearing you guys talk about thinking about the humans and like pulling out as like, thinking about it from a big view. During like working with broadcast lists, right, you are dealing with pretty much your highest performing folks, right? Folks that are that I like to think of as like the folks who go on Reddit to like discuss Westworld theories, right? So for me, thinking about the humans was actually getting really into the weeds and thinking of like, what are fun Easter eggs I can give these people, or what are fun ways we can engage, on Twitter about the texts we just sent, or what is it like when folks are texting with their friends, like during a debate, right? When they get like a fun reaction GIF from the campaign, right? That's like a totally different interaction than, they're going to have in pretty much any other media. So that was super exciting. And for me, it's just so different to think about as like, how do we pull back and think about the humans from like a really far experience? Because I like to think about it as like, how do we get like really deep in the weeds, right? I was one of those people who like dissected everything on Lost, and I was like, this should be the same kind of experience for those folks, right? They should want to see like every text Hillary Clinton sends and like talk about them with their friends. So I like to think about the humans. I like to get real deep in the weeds. So it's really exciting that other folks like take care of that high level stuff. So I don't have to.
Did we lose Alex? Okay, well.
I think she had a jump.
I guess for me, it's always it comes back to what about feelings, Maya Angelou's wisdom about people will always remember how you feel really guides me every day, because everyone wants to feel good, and there's a lot of different ways to make people feel good. And that was actually one of the guiding principles of this book, like Brad mentioned. There were a lot of things that were kind of problem oriented or obstacle oriented, because we all hit those tech obstacles at some point, but ultimately it's about how can digital be a tool that empowers human connection. And for me, that comes across in video. That's just the way I tell video and storytelling, actually very specifically storytelling, because to me, if you want to send a message and have it really come across, it needs emotional impact, and through storytelling, I don't think there's a better way. And I don't know, if you guys think differently, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts on humans. I think it's pretty important as humans. I don't know, at some point we'll have to have this conversation about how we feel about the robots, but I think we're not quite there yet. Although Jim is a doctor of robotics, he may know better, and he could be a robot for all we know. We may have entered Westworld already.
If the robots are listening, I love them.
Dear future overlords, we're sure you've already analyzed this several times. We all love you. To close up, I just want to thank you all deeply for your contributions. It's been amazing to watch this new edition come together, and it feels like a pretty big new moment watching it come out, and just the pathway over the last year from a random coffee meeting with Lloyd, where Lloyd said he wanted to write a book on SMS, and I said, we don't actually have a chapter on SMS, and we're writing a new book. And he said, I would love to do that, because that also sounds not like writing an entire book, which turns out is hard. And so just thank you so much for contributing that, and everyone who contributed your pieces. And if you've watched all the way to the end, or if you're watching this later in life, and you love what you heard from them, their stories are literally in the book. And so it's available on Amazon, on the Kindle. There are lots of places you can get it, and lots of places. Currently, it's on Amazon and on the Kindle, but you can get it there, and that covers a big swath of the internet, as we know. I guess maybe we'll have the Whole Foods in the frozen section or something. Who knows? But thank you all for contributing, and for those of you who have hung out with us and watched this, or if you're watching it later, just thank you. You can keep connecting. We're going to tweet out links to these folks. You can actually connect with them from inside of the book. It's very analog to digital, but that in the book there are then ways to connect with folks. And check out the website. We've got the trainings up now. We're also going to be rolling out a community Slack channel that will just be relatively open but moderated in roughly a month or so. We want to make sure we roll it out in a healthy way, because I've seen a couple of those become train wrecks. But we want it to be a good experience for humans. And just thank you, everyone, and we'll connect with you again soon.
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you, Brad and Katrina.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.